I'd like to welcome to the JPP, the Jewish Philanthropy Podcast, a close friend of mine, Daniel Lowy. Daniel is a seasoned financial expert with a track record for identifying underperforming businesses and executing successful business turnarounds. He received his MBA in Finance and Entrepreneurial Management from the Wharton School, which we're going to focus on and talk about, and his Bachelor's in Economics and Finance and Master's in Commerce from the University of New South Wales, which I think is in Australia, if I am not mistaken. Daniel has a broad range of executive and investment experience in the United States and international marketplace, with a particular focus on healthcare. At the moment, he is the CEO of EMU Health, and he's also a board member of CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy Foundation. He's a board member at the Orthodox Union, my employer. He's involved in many other communal endeavors, which maybe he'll share with us. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Rabbi.
Okay, so please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, about your upbringing. Give us a little flavor of what it was like growing up in Australia.
So I grew up in Sydney,
Okay,
to a very philanthropic family, very involved. My father, my parents, very Zionist. My grandparents, incredibly Zionistic. My grandfather built the first Jewish club, the Hakoah Club in Sydney. And it was really like the shul and the school. And they were big supporters of the shul, Central Synagogue, School Moriah College, and Israel through Keren HaYesod. And it was through that lens that I learned philanthropy.
beautiful. So I actually I spent a summer in Australia many summers ago, the summer of 2000, and I climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And also Rabbi Wolf, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the current rabbi of Sydney, of the major central synagogue, was actually in Perth that summer when I was in Perth. So I know him well. So beautiful. So obviously you have a rich legacy, no pun intended, but a rich philanthropic legacy of connection to Zionism, connection to Israel, as well as community building, which I know you have followed in those footsteps.
Yeah, it's also very important while you focus on Jewish Jewish tzedakah, you also have to have a component of your giving to non-Jewish institutions, because in order for us to have friends, and it's really important to see that now, to have friends, you need to also give to enable us to encourage them to be friends with us. So right. Like I'm also very involved. You know, you mentioned CUNY. I was involved with the CUNY School of Public Health, and even though CUNY is a very anti-Semitic institution, and I consult with Rabbi Hauer on how to handle that, and he said just stay involved and make sure you're there. And it's very interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was introduced by nature of my relationship with CUNY to an Israeli organization of young unaffiliated Jews, and we were able to get 500 of them on a Saturday night down to Varick Street to hear Bret Stephens and Congressman Richie Torres speak. Oh, so wow. You never know where this leads you.
I happen to be a big fan of what you're espousing and what you're a proponent of, because you're absolutely right. Like, we live in a world today where relationships are so key, and besides a battle on the battlefield, which is painful to watch, there's of course the battle in the eyes of public opinion, and one needs to be able to marshal the requisite support. And if you're not there all the time, and you just come now, like, it's nobody's interested. It's hard enough as it is, even when we are investing in relationships, as you're saying. You can't just kind of like show up in the moment of need and expect people to back you.
Yeah, and I include political donations in that.
Okay.
So I'm a big giver. I'm a big giver to the Democratic Party, to the politicians, because in New York there's one party.
That's right.
You have to be a Democrat. So that's who I give to. I don't vote because I'm just a green card holder, but I do support a number of politicians, both on not just on the federal level. It's actually even more important on the local and state level, I believe, than on the federal level, which is really a mantra taught to me by Maury Litwack from Teach and from the OU, where you can actually get more bang for your buck and they're actually the ones that are making the decisions on the local level that affect us on a daily basis. Like just this morning, you know, Mike Gianaris, a senator from New York, he's one of the big leaders in New York State. I think he's the assistant, the number 2 in the Senate. And he had a letter to put out, and I was able to get on the phone with Mike Gianaris and Joe Adabo and have them sign it because I have that relationship with them, and it's not for thousands of dollars. It's like, first of all, they believe in it, but you need to make sure that they're winning their races in their primaries so that they don't lose to DSA.
Fascinating. No, it's so interesting. And this is like an additional aspect of that. Clearly, like you're saying, it's for the immediate impact in their roles and what they do. And on occasion, sometimes some of these individuals do ultimately break through to higher levels of government. And then clearly, you know, you've been there with them, you know, for the ride the entire time.
I really do it for unity. It's really for us with the non-Jews, because we really rely on them. And it's, you know, one of the things that really hit me the last few weeks was how supportive they've been of Israel. You hear about the squad, but we had how many in the Congress, how many congressmen support Israel?
Right.
And the president's been wonderful, and Hakeem Jeffries in the House, and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and all the way through I've spent time with Kathy Hochul and with Mayor Adams. And it's really important that these people do not only what's right, but we need to help them. We need to support them.
Right. No, I hear you.
So that's part of philanthropy, as far as I'm concerned. And I actually, you know, I spoke to a few rabbis, and it's part of MISA. It's actually part of MISA to give.
I hear
to give politicians, even though it's not technically what we do, but it's part of MISA because it's really helpful.
I hear it has exponential, right? Impact wise is enormous. I mean, it's really enormous. I just saw actually on social media that Rav Usher Weiss, who's a renowned posek and Rav in Yerushalayim, he's with my friend and colleague Rav Shai Shechter, going to different congressmen to just express thank you, gratitude for all that you've done, which is enormous. You know, we always talk about the United States-Israel relationship, etc., AIPAC, different things, but when you're seeing it like in the day-to-day right now, it's really emotional. I was in Europe last week for various reasons, and I came through, haven't told anybody this, but we're talking about friends and a few other friends who listen to this. I walked through customs, and I actually got very emotional because I felt like, you know, all week I was running around in countries where I really didn't feel friendship or safety or security. And it's hard to feel safe anywhere today, but there is something about the United States of America that I think is very, very unique and special. And I think those of us who invest in that relationship appreciate that, understand the gift that we have and being able to live here and have the support that we do.
Yeah, and that's something that my parents taught me and my grandparents taught me.
Beautiful.
You know, I remember I was with my father. I must have been 6 or 7, maybe. And we were giving a lift to Peter Collins was his name. He was never the Premier of New South Wales. We thought he would become the Premier, but he always showed me you have to make sure that the politicians, that you're friendly with them. It's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And whether, you know, I'm a Baal Tshuva, so even before I was religious, that was, you know, it's really part of me to be philanthropically active in both the Jewish organizations and non-Jewish organizations politically. It's all like they're like three pods of a tripod.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people misconstrue or misunderstand. I think people who watch from afar and see members of our community engage with politicians, they think there's a certain, like, I don't know, like, I don't even know how to describe it. They don't really understand what's being done actually. And I think you're describing it very powerfully, the value of it.
You know, like with Teach, you know, I think we raise $5 million a year of money. Like, I give quite a bit to Teach because I really believe in it. But the reason I believe in it is because from the $5 million of fundraising, we can get our schools 45. I mean, I think we just had a $70 million raise on the state, in the state budget, of which the Jewish schools get probably 30 to 35%.
Well,
So it's a lot of money.
bang for your buck. That's that's for sure. That is for sure. Tell me a little bit about your interest in the healthcare space. When you were growing up, was that something you aspired to be engaged in, or that kind of evolved at a
Oh,
later stage?
I fell into it. I started when I was living in Israel, from 2008 to 2011. I was working for a hedge fund, an Israeli hedge fund called Ion Asset Management. I learned a lot there, and I did a lot of work on healthcare companies. Teva Pharmaceuticals, Perrigo, which is another company, Omrix, which was another company, a lot of healthcare stuff based in Israel. And then I got, it's sort of like Hashem presented this opportunity to me, so I had to take it, and I ended up in healthcare, and it's really wonderful because I'm able to help a lot of people. We do a lot of work on Medicaid patients, and really help them out. And things come up. Like I remember I had these McGrath scopes, which are like intubation scopes to intubate patients, and I had a bunch of ones lying around during COVID, and they needed them. They were looking for them, so I sent half of them. I sent to a hospital in the South Shore of Long Island, and another where an anesthesiologist Shani was working, and the other half I gave to Hatzalah of the West Side.
Oh,
And then some people came to me during the war now and said, "Oh, we need some scopes." So I bought them, and then by that time the person had left. So I called up my good friend Ellie Beer and some of the people him,
also
and
good.
I said, "I have a bunch of McGrath scopes. Do you want them?" So they took them, and God willing, got them to Israel. But it's like it's so inculcated in me to give. It's really important.
It's a beautiful thing. More people should learn from that model. Really, it's very powerful.
And you really have to I push myself. Like I don't just give a little bit. I push myself to give as much as I can, and then some.
Do you ever find that it's hard? Like, have you ever find when it hurts to give or it's hard to give?
Yeah, there are times when it's hard to give. The biggest issue I have now is I'm focusing all my efforts on Israel, right? And I'm talking about like tachlis, like Magen David Adom. I gave some money for Magen David Adom. Gave a major donation, and then I gave a little bit to this one, a little bit to that one. But then I think the issue is in America, then you have the local charities,
Right.
and like I'm still giving to my school, I'm still giving to my shul. It's really important.
Right.
But then there's the other charities that you give, and I think it's important for them to understand that right now our brothers and sisters are in need in Israel, and that's where the money's going to go to.
Right.
And for the most part, I haven't had any pushback. I've had a couple of charities saying, no, you should give it to us and not to them. And what happens then is just I won't give the time of day the next time, right?
Right.
It's still important to give to certain things, but some things are more important than others.
Right.
And you have to prioritize.
100%. 100%. That is 100% accurate. So I wanted to talk to you, the truth is, for a long time on this podcast because of your broad-based philanthropic approach, but in particular, in this critical time, I'm glad that we were able to connect because a letter that you recently wrote that you shared on social media was called to my attention, and it was in the framework of pushback that's going on across the Ivies in general, in terms of the tremendous blatant anti-Semitism, anti-Israel hatred of Jews going on college campuses. It's painful even to articulate it and speak it out. Thinking of the Columbia professor from Israel recently who spoke out on campus quite emotionally about fearing for his safety, and so many of these unfortunate stories that we continue to hear about. And thankfully, there has been pushback. Right, there have been leaders with a moral, with a backbone, with a fabric, every fiber of their being, protesting, particularly in Penn. And I know that share with our audience a little bit your relationship with Penn. Like we mentioned, you're an alum. Your letter specifies, in more greater detail in terms of your grandfather and unique relationship there. It must be, I think you expressed, incredibly difficult for you to do what you did. So share with us a little bit about, the thought process that went into that.
So I have let me start by, I have so much hakarat tov for Wharton and how much I've been helped. I went there. My wife Ilana went to Penn, which is why I ended up going to Wharton, and it was really quite difficult. But like I said, Israel comes first, and it was, I'd already seen with the Palestinian Writers Festival. I wrote to them a couple of weeks ago. I had some issues when I was on campus, and I got unsatisfactory answers. But you know what? There's people who stand with you and people who don't stand with you. And if they don't stand with you, they're not really for you. They're against you. and I got so much chizuk from what Mark Rowan wrote that it's funny. Hashgacha Pradas played into it. A friend of mine was on an airplane back from Israel with someone else who went to Penn, and I ended up speaking to her, and then she kicked me to someone else. And I said, "What can I do to help?" They said, "Write a letter." I said, "Fine." Like, I wouldn't have even, and people said, "Thank you for the letter." Right? It's the only thing to do. Like, I didn't think about not doing it. It was really important. And you know what? If my kids can't go to Penn, they can't go to Penn. But I don't even want them there if this is what's going to happen. It broke my heart, really broke my heart.
I'm going to interject just for a second, and this has been on my mind for a while, and I've been a little lazy, frankly, but I probably shouldn't be. I'm just going to use an example, and maybe it's not appropriate for this conversation. We can always edit it out if need be. So I'm a very big fan of Professor Adam Grant, who's a professor in Wharton. He's Jewish. I devour his content. I share his content. And I don't mean just to pick on Adam Grant per se, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but there are a few Jewish influencers who I follow their content. I subscribe to their content. I listen to them regularly. They have huge platforms, and it's bothersome to me that on an issue of such glaring, you're either with the good guys or the bad guys, right and wrong. I've meant to write to some of these individuals. Again, they'll probably just ignore me. They get so much email and people reaching out to them. You get an automatic response with 8 different addresses when you reach out to Adam Grant, depending why you're reaching out to him. But I don't know, this is a little bit of a different point than your letter, which we'll get more deeply into. But I don't know, like, is it right? Is it wrong to be like asking some of these individuals to make a statement in support of Israel?
I take a different approach. First of all, there were professors at Penn that did come out and say that they support Israel. I don't know if Adam Grant was on that list. I know that Professor Andy Abel, who's a big finance economics professor, and David Reedstein, who is a famous marketing professor, big supporter of Israel, both of them. I had them, so that's why I looked for their names. I didn't really look for Adam Grant, so I don't know why. But I think we have to, it's not about asking them to put you can ask them to put themselves on the line, right? But I think that we should be looking at ourselves and saying, what can we do to take these professors out of those schools? Because we have a couple of good universities in Israel. We also have Yeshiva University. Rabbi Berman wrote that great letter and got a bunch of people to sign it. But I think, like, let's go and see. Maybe Yeshiva University can hire some of these professors and turn themselves into a proper business school, right? I've heard friends saying that they're now looking at YU as one of their feeder. Like, I think Bank of America is looking at YU as a feeder school, and let's turn YU into a powerhouse. Obviously, we need to raise money, but like, there's no reason why you can't go and hire the pick of the eye of these Jewish professors, even the non-Jewish professors from the Ivies, and I think we could create our own business school. Like, I was, we have SciSims, but maybe there's something. Maybe there's something else that we can add to sort of SciSims School of Business to make it more appealing to students, maybe even at a graduate level. which they have, but it's not so real, and turn it into a powerhouse. Why should students go to get their MBA at Columbia when they could go up the road and get it at YU? Right? Let's make it. Let's go in high. I would, go in higher, like the guy from Columbia, and some guys from Wharton, and some guys from NYU, and turn it into a powerhouse institution. And then we could, Mount Sinai did it in the 1800s, where they created the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, because the Jews couldn't go anywhere else. Maybe that's what we have to do. I don't know whether you should just abort or leave the Ivies, but I don't know if you can be a student there anymore.
Or a professor there, you're saying.
So, there are a bunch of professors I think they could hire.
So interesting. So interesting. I've heard people remark, family members even, just comment that, YU, this is the worst possible situation ever. So I want to be careful how I say this, but at the same time, clearly there should be, like you're saying, there should be an opportunity for YU to galvanize itself as the Jewish institution right now. Again, there's so many other things going on. I don't know if this is being focused on or not, but I hear what you're saying. It's so interesting, really, really interesting.
So I think that YU as a brand. Think about the adjunct professors they could have come through that program.
So interesting. It's really interesting. It's clever. I hear. So what was the response? Did you get a response? You wrote your letter to the president of
So I received a response from the dean of Wharton, but not regarding that letter, regarding an email I'd sent her a couple of weeks before. It's like took her 5 weeks to get back to me.
About the previous event, you're saying?
About the previous event. No, even I sent her an email. I'm closing my checkbook because I didn't really know how to get this letter out, nor how to write it, so I had some help with that. But I haven't heard anything from Scott Bach or Elizabeth McGill. And you know what? They got to go.
Are you privy to any information? I know that there's efforts being made. Like, is pressure being? I only see one side. I see our side pressuring them. Like, I'm guessing they must have support on the other side, correct? Or they wouldn't be taking their position.
I don't have any insight into what's going on there. I was never on the board. I was never, but I know how hard it must be for a couple of board members on a huge board to make change like that.
Yeah.
Right? I would face it at CUNY. And I'm just on the board of one of their foundations at one of their schools. It's very difficult, but I think she hasn't shown leadership. So, and the chair is responsible for the chancellor. So, I'm just going to follow what Mark Rowan does, and if he starts to give money again, I'll re-engage. But I don't hold hope. I don't hold high hope. It's also very important for the students to be safe.
Right.
That's very important.
We saw at Cooper Union what transpired recently, which was crazy to see that. I'm curious. This is just a technical question about the finances. Is there a certain threshold of enough donors pulling their funds where it actually makes a dent? Like, I imagine some of these schools have such crazy level of endowment. What level of is it more just a statement, or does it actually hurt them in the pocket? Like, what's your sense of that?
Well, I think if you see what Brandeis did yesterday, where they expelled the students for Palestine, it's getting to the point where I don't know if Brandeis has a lot of Middle East money. It might be the Middle East money that they crave, and maybe there's not enough Jewish support, although I doubt it. Time will tell.
And there's literally a battle for our campuses going on right now, right? The government's trying to intercede, but I mean, it seems like it's a cesspool in some of these places.
Well, I think from a policy standpoint, you have to be American or have a green card to give money to politicians. Should be the same for universities as well.
Interesting. Is your set meaning?
Or you should make a massive fee that should be taxed and something like that.
I mean, is right now is there like crazy Arab money like flowing into these
Crazy,
places? Yeah,
crazy Arab.
really.
And they've done it for 20 years.
And what's their agenda? Meaning that their agenda is exactly what's playing out right now. Like what?
Their
Why?
agenda has, I believe their agenda is exactly what's playing out. And also, I don't, the Saudis have changed their tune, it seems, with regards to Israel. But, you know, once you start the ball rolling, 20 years ago, they were not like this, right? But once you start the ball rolling, where does it stop? So maybe the horse is bolted and the gate can't be shut anymore.
Right. I felt good, I'll say like that, when I saw the amount of positive response to your letter. When you
I got a lot of positive response to my letter.
You post on LinkedIn, I was very blown away. Now, oftentimes we're talking to our own echo chamber, on our social media, but be that as it may, it was I find in these times, anytime people lend support to something like that, it's very heartening, and I imagine it felt good for you also to see that kind of level of support.
Yes.
It's so
especially from friends that aren't Jewish.
interesting.
I've gotten a lot of support.
Amazing. Did you speak to your grandfather about this?
I told him I was going to write something, and I didn't mention anything. And then he heard about the letter from the INSS in Israel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. What else should people be doing right now? What else is your sense of?
I tell you what people need to be doing. They need to be going to the rallies. They need to be calling their locals, so their politicians, and say thank you. Because the other side has a lot more people than us, and they're outworking us on that.
It's true, right? They're calling. I see these emails going
Last night, we had a great rally of over 10,000 people. But is 10,000 people really a lot? How many Jews do we have? 2 million Jews, in 1 million or 2 million Jews in New York.
Right.
We should be filling these places.
Right.
Hopefully the one in Washington, D.C. will be incredibly well attended.
Yeah, I've been pushing that myself and looking forward to participating.
I'm going. Manhattan Day School, the school where my kids are at, and I'm vice president. They're sending buses of the 7th and the 8th graders. Awesome. I think it's really important. I think it's important for the politicians to know that we care about it. Right. And I think for too long, Jews, not just in this country, in Australia as well, have been too not involved enough politically. We have to vote. We have to make sure our voice matters. We have to vote in the primaries. We have to vote as a bloc. We need to follow the recommendations of the community, and then we'll have more power. Right. That's how we have to do it.
It's astounding. Like I live here, in an area of the 5 towns, and it was recently called to my attention that we have a councilman or somebody, in our representing our district who is completely anti-Israel, completely anti-Jewish, and like, how does that happen? I mean, it's like it's amazing.
And it's coming up. There's a bunch of people that need to be primaried, and we need to vote.
Right.
The Jews need to vote.
Interesting. So what is it? I mean, why are we? How do you describe it? It's just people haven't been educated, they haven't been trained, they haven't been. I saw one of the Poland. I think that the mother of one of the hostages. I saw a beautiful video where she spoke at UJA, and she was telling they called out the room. How many of you have been calling, your people, every day, and just saying, I want the hostages home. Like, so, I think a lot of people hear that, they think like, oh, it's like cute. They don't realize like that it makes.
You need to call. That's really important. It's actually the most important thing. You need to call and say thank you.
Interesting.
Let them know that we stand. Let the politicians know that we stand with them.
Wow. So interesting. It's really what I said to you before. For Vosher Weiss, I don't know if he's here otherwise, but he's taking the time to go around Congress. I think it's very powerful too. I think that you see, we're talking about Achdus and unified Jewish community. I see also in the yeshiva community that people are encouraging participation in the rally next week in DC. Choshev Rabbanim, people that are well respected in that world are good to put out a statement about the importance of the rally. So it's a Sar Yaakov. There's no question. Everybody.
I tell you, the one thing that's really astounded me, and made me so happy is the level of achdus in Israel, and seeing 3,000 Haredi men going to volunteer for the army,
Yeah, it's astounding.
and including Ariaderi's son, and then seeing pictures of the Israeli flag at Hasidic events in New York.
Mhm.
I mean, Mashiach is coming,
That's
right? You know, when I had Chani's bar mitzvah in shul, and we had a bunch of singers from Borough Park, Satmar Hasidim from Borough Park, and they sung the Hatikva,
really.
or they sung the tune of the Hatikva to Avinu Shebashamayim, the prayer for Israel. I think finally maybe the Haredim are starting to understand that the state is important.
Right, right. It's really, I mean, just speaking to different people, it's really interesting, kind of taking in the feedback from people. And I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody locally who was, you know, he was complaining to me because he can't he's so Zionistic, he can't be sovel that there are people in the universe who don't say the tefillah for the Medina or don't say the tefillah for the Chayalim. And it's interesting to see that, that is slowly changing, in certain.
I'm from Australia, and Australia's very Zionistic. And so when I came to America and I heard that there are Jews that don't support the state of Israel, I still can't figure it out. But it's astounding, actually. I wouldn't give to organizations that don't recognize the state of Israel. I just wouldn't give to them.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk for a few minutes a little bit broadly about let's talk a little bit just about some causes that are near and dear to your heart. There's some, we have some overlap, in some things, and I'd love just to, I think people are always inspired to hear. Nobody has unlimited resources, and everybody has to kind of, triage and figure out what their highest priorities are. I think you've made, eminently clear, through our broad discussion, but maybe you want to talk about, some specifics where you feel you've been able to make an impact and you're passionate about.
I think the two most important things that I can think of, apart from Israel, are your school and your shul. And I think that one should be overwhelmingly giving the majority of their money to their school and their shul. Mm-hmm. Because that's the community you live in. And the more money they have at their disposal, the more your children will learn, and the more they will see. And then they will do the same thing, and they'll follow your lead. I find that on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that guiding principle. I think that my guiding principle is that 50% of the tzedakah I give is at least 50% goes to the school or shul, at least, because you have to educate your kids, and you have to have a place to daven, and you've got to be involved. So I think that it's important that we have respect for our rabbis and our chazanim, and that we make sure that they're living properly. And I don't know whether that happens here.
I'm curious why you think your contemporaries or your peers where you live maybe don't share those values, because I saw that a little bit in my own. We know each other from the West Side. I was there for a decade, and I certainly know as a rabbi of a shul, it was hard to get support for the shul at times. I'm curious why you think people don't see it that way.
I don't understand. I don't know. If I knew, but I'm very involved.
Did you talk to people? You must hear what people say. I mean,
I don't know. I hear what they say. I don't agree with it.
What do they say? What types of things do they say?
We have to give to something else, or that's more important, or this is more important. No, I don't think that. I think the most important thing is your school and your shul.
Interesting. Very powerful.
Because that's essential. Well, otherwise, why are you there?
Right. People say, well, I pay tuition to the school, so why do I have to give more?
Because the tuition doesn't cover the cost of the education. Mm. Right? It's as simple as that.
How do you, I mean, I guess, you're giving a clarity in terms of the impact on children and your children in particular, but how do you, in essence, assess or measure like in business, right? You have an MBA from Wharton, like you clearly understand the idea of like, ROI, return on investment. Like how do you measure when you are donating into places that are making an impact, when they're not making such an impact? How do you go about assessing your, like you just decide, like Penn is a great example, right? It's not making the right impact, right? I'm pulling my investment, right? So how do you kind of assess it when it's kind of not as blatant?
So let's take the school and shul out of it, because I would give there regardless of the impact, because it doesn't have an impact if you don't invest
Mm-hmm.
in your own community. With the other things like Teach New York, it has such a multiple on what you give.
I mean, it's like a little bit, it's like the APAC model. I don't know how familiar you are or not with APAC or your feelings,
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
but it's that model, right? Of like whatever you're giving is going to be exponentially multiplied, right? That's
Yes, correct.
stuck a given, right?
Correct. So that's
I once heard
important.
somebody say the best way you could support yeshivas in Israel is to give to APAC. But there's some truth to that, right? Because of because you're not garnishing, but you're garnering the support of the American government, which is very powerful.
So where was I? So I then try and look at when someone comes to me and says this is what they're doing, I want to understand is how are you impacting the organization that you're working with, or how are you impacting the person that you're helping?
Right.
It's not necessarily about you could Teach New York has one thing, but like I'm also on the board. I guess I'm on the board of the OU now because I give to Teach New York and I give to Yachad, and I think special needs for kids is very important, and you can't you change one kid's life. It has a difference. You don't know what's gonna be.
Right.
And then like Bonai Olam, who I support, not big, but I support enough. It's the outcome that you can't always measure.
Right. I hear. I want to hear. I think you want to share with me in a private setting, but I think we could say it here, like in the sense that I remember you felt a great sense of pride when you joined the OU board, right? I think you articulated to me kind of coming from where you come from in terms of your background and being like on the board of kind of what is the quintessential kind of Orthodox Jewish organization in the States and the world, possibly. Just explain a little bit, kind of, you mentioned a little bit in terms of giving counsel to Rabbi Howard. Talk a little bit just about what that experience has been. I think it's been about a year for you now, maybe a little bit more, what that's been like for you.
Yeah, it's such a phenomenal experience being on the board of the OU. And why I love the OU is that it takes the money from kashrus and plows it back into the community.
It's this model, we're seeing a theme, a pattern in terms of Teach. I know Teach is part of the OU on some level, but this idea when you can see return on your investment, it's in a very powerful way, right? That's what you're articulating.
I feel like my effort and my time and my money is not being wasted. Mm-hmm. There are other organizations, and I'm not going to mention them on this podcast, that are also very big, but I just don't see it. Right? The OU, I really see how important it is. And we have great leadership. And everything that on campuses, with youth. Could it be done better? Yeah, I think it could be done better, which is why I get involved.
Right.
Because things can always be done better. You can always improve. Right. And that's why I give of my time, because I want to improve the organizations I'm involved with.
Right. I've been thinking a lot. I imagine, I haven't spoken to my colleagues at JLIC, right, Jewish learning on campus, but I imagine also that they probably are getting strong support right now. In particular because they're on the front lines in terms of strengthening our students on college campuses. which is really a hallmark of a piece of what, the work at the OU does. Right? I mean,
Correct.
the OU is incredible because it has an incredibly broad reach, right? Like there are very few organizations that touch so many different facets of the Jewish community. So that's what makes it, I think, very unique.
I think it's really important. And I think it promotes efficient giving. There's a lot of inefficiency. By the way, while we're on this podcast, I'd be remiss to say that there's a lot of inefficiencies in our community that we need to fix. Like just on the Upper West Side, we have too many shuls. We have too much underutilized real estate.
Right.
We have shuls competing with each other for staff. We have for tenants, and I think I've been advocating for a long time about the need for consolidation.
Right.
And it falls on deaf ears. But I'm going to keep advocating for it no matter what. It's just so much administrative overlap. I think that there's a case where there's a number of independent organizations that should be better off under Yeshiva University. I think that, I come from, in Sydney, we have this organization called the Jewish Communal Appeal. You basically have two charities. You have two tzedakahs you give to, or three tzedakahs you give to in Australia. You give to Keren HaYesod, you give to the JCA, you give to your shul. But I think that there's too much money, not too much money. There's too many organizations, and I think we could really. It's not just we have too many buildings,
right?
And that's one of my pet peeves with regards to Jewish organizations.
What's just on the Upper West Side? What's your take in terms of post-COVID? How much the community has changed, in the last few years?
So it's interesting. My shul got bigger.
Really?
We have a wonderful Rabbi, Daniel Sherman.
Sure, a good friend.
And he, out of COVID, reopened the shul for the kids quicker than I wouldn't call them our competitors, but the other shuls in the neighborhood.
Right.
And we've grown. We've grown quite a bit.
Really?
But the other shuls have shrunk.
Yeah.
And I for the life of me, I don't know why we need a shul on 66, 76, 86, and 96.
Right.
And then we have all the shtibels.
Right.
For me, it doesn't make sense. But I'm only one person. And, they say, and we have a school on 75th, which could house a shul. Because the school is open from, Monday to Friday, and it's closed on Shabbos.
And people used to use it for smachot. I don't know if they still do or not.
Yeah, but I just think it's an inefficient use of real estate.
Right.
Yeah, everyone has their own thing, but it's one of the things that bewilders me.
I hear you. I've heard these.
I think not the 60s anymore.
Right.
Most of our shuls are empty.
Right. I hear that.
And these buildings are worth tens of millions of dollars.
Right. 100%.
Maybe even more. It's just, if I was in charge, I would change the whole thing, but I'm not. And I'm not seeking that either.
I hear. As we wind down our riveting conversation, I'm gonna ask you I'll ask you one quick question that I ask a lot of my guests, and then I'll ask you just a broad-based question. Tell our guests a little bit. There's something people wouldn't guess about you, or just what you do in your free time or your spare time that you just enjoy that helps you relax. Something a little more of a personal nature.
Oh, I love shul. I love going to shul.
Really?
Love it.
Okay.
It's my favorite activity of the week.
Really?
Yep.
What's that about?
I don't know. I've always loved shul.
Really?
Love it.
So interesting. What about shul do you like?
I can't tell you what it's what I don't. I love it. I love going.
Interesting.
I love the chazan. I love to listen to a rabbi's speech. I love to sit there with my kids. I love to see my friends. I love the davening. I love to daven.
Got it all. Wow. Beautiful. That's very powerful. I love that. That's a great. I'm gonna have to clip that response, and we'll send it to Chazan Muller. We'll send it to Rabbi Sherman. But it's great. It's great. It's great. So, final question. Let me just, we're living now in, you and I are not that many years apart. I don't think we might be a few years apart. I might be a little older than you, but not by much, and not by so much. But I don't remember living in more, in my lifetime. There hasn't been I think a more complicated time for Jews, for the state of Israel. We've heard about these times like in history, right? We've learned about them, but I think we're actually living through it now. I think we're experiencing it. The things that we've learned about and that we've heard about, and I'm at a loss for words. I work in the sphere of words, but I don't. The words are not coming easily these days. It's just it's emotion and it's and thoughts and hard to concentrate and just and checking the news every other minute. Like, what are just what are your what words of chizuk do you have, or what insights have helped you over the last month as a bomb, or as just something that's comforting? That was bomb, BALM, not BOMB, not to be confused, obviously, with the situation. But I'm curious just to hear anything that you've heard that's been helpful, that's been meaningful, that's been some solace in what is almost like an unconsolable type of situation that we find ourselves in.
I think the solace is the achdus.
Okay.
That is the biggest solace. The solace that Benny Gantz decided to sit in a coalition. My 93-year-old grandfather lives in Israel. He was here for the bar mitzvah, and we didn't want him to go back. He wanted to go, and he went, and he's happy. And I think what I got out of this is my wife and I, we want to move to Israel ultimately. And it actually spurred us to do, to want to do it even more. And because that's our country, that's our homeland. But on the other hand, what do we do? We need people in a diaspora. It's really important. But, I've known already for a few years that the Jews had 50 years of relatively pain-free. The Ashkenazim, I'm not talking about the Sephardim, because they were kicked out. But we've had 50 years of I guess, respite after the Holocaust. And we're back to where we were, but we're stronger. We're stronger. We're a stronger country. Look at what's going on now. And we're moral. We're a moral army.
Right.
And I really believe it. And you have to really believe it. No time for wishy-washy about that. You have to believe in the state. You have to believe in the IDF. You have to follow the leadership, because that's the way we're going to get through it. The recriminations can happen after, and I'm sure there will be some. But the achdus, to get a WhatsApp of a soldier speaking Yiddish, that's like, we never heard that before.
Right.
And also the other thing, I was in Abu Dhabi a few months ago for an Israeli related conference. The world's changed. And you have to ask yourself, why did this attack happen?
I was thinking it's exactly
because
that.
The Jews and the Saudis are on track to make peace.
Right.
And I have a friend in Saudi Arabia. And I spoke to him, and it's going to happen.
Mm. And
that's why this happened. They did not want us to make peace with Saudi Arabia. And we're Jews. Bechol davar dor. Every generation they try to kill us. We have to realize that. If you realize that and you internalize it, you think, well, how are we going to make the best case possible for ourselves? That's the solace.
Right. I think it's just everything you said is 1,000% accurate. I think it's just it's the pain of knowing that they got the better of us in the moment a little bit, right? That our guard was caught down, and we
have to continually keep our guard up.
Right. Right. All right, Dan, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and in particular for your leadership and all the great things that you're doing for our people, particularly in these trying times. I hope and I pray that we can rejoice together and celebrate together in our hopefully very powerful victory, and with the unification of all our Jewish people together, with the coming of Mashiach, b'mehera b'yameinu, amen.
Amen.